ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ MP ਕੈਰੀ ਲਿਨ ਫਿਨਲੇ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੰਬਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਬਾਊਟ 20 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਇਸ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਲਾਇਰ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਆਫ ਰੈਵਨਿਊ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਐਸੋਸੀਏਟ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਆਫ ਡਿਫੈਂਸ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਦੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਹੁਣ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵਿਪ ਨੇ ਓਟਵਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਬਹੁਤ ਸਮਝਦਾਰ ਅਤੇ ਸਿਆਣੇ ਇੱਕ ਲਾਇਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਦ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ ਬੜਾ ਅਲੱਗ ਬੋਲਣ ਦਾ, ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਢੰਗ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਰਾਜਨੀਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਣਾ, ਰਾਜਨੀਤੀ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਬਹੁਤ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਓਟਵਾ 'ਚ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ। ਅਤੇ ਨਵੇਂ ਲੀਡਰ ਪੀਅਰ ਪੋਲੀਐਵ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਅਕਾਊਂਟੇਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਕੀ ਹੈ, ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੀਰੀਅਡ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵਿਪ ਕੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਦੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ MP ਕੈਰੀ ਲਿਨ ਫਿਨਲੇ ਐਂਡ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵਿਪ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਆਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੇ। ਕੈਰੀ, ਗੁੱਡ ਮਾਰਨਿੰਗ ਐਂਡ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਸ਼ੋ।
Good morning, Harjit. Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal and Merry Christmas to you. And
Thank you.
how's holidays are going on?
Very busy for me. I have 4 children, and they're
Yes.
all either married or engaged, and I have some grandchildren. So
That's wonderful.
they've all been visiting. It's been a lovely family time for me and a nice break from Ottawa, where, as you know, I travel there
Yes.
every week back
Yeah.
and forth, and it's just good to be home for a little bit and have some time with family.
How did you find out being a lawyer, serving community? Obviously, money is involved there. Money is involved in as a MP also. How did you find out working as a lawyer and as a MP and minister?
I think a lot of the talents I may have naturally and those that I learned through law have assisted me very well in politics. I was used to talking on my feet because I was a courtroom lawyer, a civil litigation lawyer for many, many years, over 30 years. And I was used to being asked questions and interrupted by judges. Now I'm interrupted by other politicians.
Yes.
And you're used to learning your file and knowing the subject. I also did a fair bit of media because I was president of the BC branch of the Canadian Bar Association. And in those leadership positions, I did do some media, spoke on behalf of lawyers and the law profession and legal topics, both nationally, regionally, and internationally, actually. So I think all of those things, a familiarity with the law, how to read a piece of legislation, how to interpret it, these are all things I learned as a lawyer. In politics, you have a lot of strong personalities.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strong personalities in the legal profession, too,
Yes,
as
pretty
you
much
can
same.
imagine. So now, as Chief Opposition Whip,
Yes.
I am dealing with those personalities and part of the leadership team to put forward our positions as a government in waiting, as a united caucus and team with focus. That's all part of my job as whip.
As a whip. So when you got elected first time, went to Ottawa, what did you find out, which you didn't see while you were running as a MP? Once you got there in Ottawa, because in my community, you are very much involved in community. We think just campaign, become MP, and very simple. Just fly there, sit there, come back. And what is the role as an MP? Did you find out very hard than your law firm?
I think I found out both some good things and some bad things.
Okay.
I would say the bad things I found out was that I am used to our legal system here being somewhat formal and very much about being appropriate. Even if you're arguing in a courtroom against another lawyer, you're arguing on behalf of your client.
Yes.
You are supposed to separate out your own emotions somewhat from the argument you're presenting, and you're always expected to be very respectful of your opponent and the judge and the courtroom atmosphere and take seriously where you are.
Very good.
That was how I started out in law very young. I went through school a couple of years ahead. So I started university at 16. I went right through.
My.
So this is the training I have. This is what I learned. When I went to Parliament, I was surprised sometimes at the lack of decorum, the lack of respect shown between
rivalry
opponents on the floor of Parliament and generally in committee. I thought I was going perhaps to a more elevated place, and I found that it isn't quite that way. And often people don't always, as they should, in my opinion, separate out their philosophies, their ideologies from personalities. They could do a much better job of that. I try very much to be respectful of whomever I'm dealing with. I mean, sometimes I get upset too, but generally speaking, I think I do a fairly good job. That was a big change, and I was not expecting that. On the good side, I feel that when you practice law, it's a very solitary type of profession. It's very much about working on your files for your clients, your cases. You strategize and plan out how you're going to present your case in court, and how you will get as much out of your client as you can so that you can present for them, put their best foot forward. In politics, you have a more well-rounded, I would think, way of serving people. You're able to be part of a team, and that is a fairly large team.
Yes.
And you are able to work together for good purposes for the people. And when I'm going to an event, say, I'm not just there to attend an event. I'm there to meet people, to talk to them, to say, yes, do follow up with me. People will come to me with their issue. I say, yes, come and see me in my office. I feel that I'm able to touch more people, therefore help more people. And I've always been a person who believed in, I guess what you call servant leadership, that you lead by serving. And I want to help. I feel politics gives me that ability to do it in a much broader scale.
And you are BC representative of Mr. Poilievre's team now. It's all province, and you are a leader of in his campaign. He gave you respect. Pretty much he got there in 2004. You went there in 2000. Pretty much same. You saw each other. How did you find out? How is this leader other than if you comparison between Harper and Mr. Poilievre?
When I arrived in 2011 into a government that already had its own structures, its own ways of doing things. Plus, we were a majority, and Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister. So you're not going to question things too much. You go in and you do your part. And the Prime Minister thankfully recognized some of my abilities and made me a Parliamentary Secretary to Justice right away. And then, as you've mentioned, named me to Cabinet. So I had a lot of responsibility, but within a structure that already existed. And the Prime Minister was very bright. I had met him many times, but never had the opportunity to work alongside him. Working alongside him, I realized he was a very bright man. He thought things out. He thought about the consequences of his decisions. And he was a strong leader internationally. He was well respected internationally. With Pierre, who I chose to support in the leadership, and then he named me his BC chair. And we did very well in his leadership here, which I'm grateful for. Many enthusiastic people, many large rallies, which I hadn't really seen before. Certainly in 2011, when we won the majority, Stephen Harper had some large rallies, but I didn't see the kind of rallies where even in small towns we're having a large turnout.
Yeah.
In Nanaimo Ladysmith, there were 1,500 people. In Sydney, which is where Elizabeth May is from, there was about 1,500 people in a small center.
Yes.
3,000 at the Italian Cultural Center here. So, you're seeing enthusiasm that is very welcome. With Pierre, he is warm and personable, whereas Stephen Harper, as much as I respected him, tended to be introverted. He would do what was necessary, and he met people all the time and took pictures, but he is naturally a little more introverted. I'm obviously, you know me well enough to know I'm quite an extrovert. So for me, I couldn't understand sometimes why he just wasn't more friendly. And it isn't that he was unfriendly, he just was a bit shy, honestly. Pierre isn't shy, and he is quite warm and friendly, which, whether people know that about him, they quickly learn that when they see him speaking in person. I am hoping that now that the new year is here, and we had so much work to do in the fall to get organized within caucus and in Ottawa, I'm hoping that he will be traveling more and more and being out meeting more and more of the Canadian people because they will like him when they meet him.
Sitting across the aisle, how it is sitting in opposition or running a government to now when you are across the aisle, you are asking whatever you want to ask, whether they answer or not. I'm watching while I'm doing show on the TV, they show the immediate your question period. Most of the time, government who is in power, they don't answer the opposition. How is that relation there and across the aisles?
It is frustrating. To be honest, because you do want some answers. And my assessment is that when we were in government and I was a minister, I honestly tried to answer the questions. There are some times where you don't know the answer, where you might say, this is news to me. I will take that under advisement. I will get back to you. There are times when you're not ready to give the fullest answer, and therefore you're going to give a shortened form or maybe a more high-level form. But what the Liberal government is doing right now, where they simply do not answer at all, or they give an answer to another question, I don't believe we did a lot of that. I'm not saying we never did it, but to do it almost every person who responds and as a way of dealing with question period is disrespectful in my view of the Canadian people. It does not allow for the proper kind of dialogue that is meant to happen in question period. It's not really a debate because everything is timed. We're only allowed 30 questions for our 30 seconds for a question. They're allowed about 35 to answer. It is quite scripted because it's on a time constraint. However, it is still a time when information should be given because we're asking the questions for the Canadian people.
Yes.
We're not asking them for ourselves. We bring questions often from home. I might meet someone in the grocery store. I'm in the grocery store and people will come up to me and say, "Are you Kerry Lynne?" Or sometimes they say, "Are you that conservative lady?" And I go, "Yes, that's me." And they say, "I'm really struggling. Groceries are so expensive. Things are hard. The family is cut back, say at Christmas or just on eating." I'm going to go to Ottawa and I'm going to ask a question about how inflation is making groceries so much more expensive, life more expensive, how it's eating into the paychecks of the people I represent. So I'm not asking the question just for me, although I have those same questions.
Yes.
I'm asking them for the people I represent, and they should show the respect to give answers that are meaningful.
You are very much involved in community. You have very close friends they are family friends from years and years. And We are concerned. I asked many times, Mr. Polyev, same I wanted to get you. You are very senior there, and you will be, once your government is there, you will be a senior minister there. This secular bill, C-21 of Quebec, is bothering too much of the minorities. From Kamagata Maru to Bill C-20, this is big bridge to cross. And your party should be very much clear about that wind should not flow this side, out of Quebec. And there should be some policies in place once you get in the government. Mr. Polyev said many times, that won't happen, that won't happen. We accept that. We admire that. We want that not happen. But there should be something, piece of paper. There should be some legislation. There should be some law in the system that secular bill doesn't align with Canadian values. Only thing, freest country in the world when we are open to practice our religion, we are open to practice our culture, we are open and respect each other. So what would you like to say about, because you are a lawyer, you know all the roots, how you will tackle that?
Firstly, I agree with you.
Yeah.
There is no place for it in Canada,
Yeah.
in my view.
Yeah.
Quebec often, because of the unique Canadian history with Quebec, tends to go its own way on certain things.
Yes.
But we will never see this in the rest of the country. We will absolutely be part of our policies not to see this in the rest of the country. I do not understand it, really.
Yeah.
It's not the reality of our communities and the way we all live together. We're all in this together.
Obviously.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah,
and once you're here, and now we're all in it together. We're all family, and we hurt the same ways about the same things, and we take joy in the same ways in the same things. We're just human beings.
Yes.
So for me, it is very difficult to understand even why any government, including a sub-government, would want to separate people the way they have. One of the issues, big issues I have with this present Liberal government is they're very quick to divide people, to pit people against each other, to say things that make one group upset with another group, or think that somehow they are championing one group, which it really isn't the way to govern. To govern well and to govern with confidence and in a way that people have confidence in us when you vote for us is to literally understand and have your policies that we will work together and it will benefit everyone. If you're a working person, my dad was an electrician, and I grew up in very much a working man's family. I was one of 6 kids, and my dad worked with his hands all his life. And of my 4 brothers, one's an electrician, one's a carpenter. One ended up being a realtor. He's passed away. And another one who's passed away was a pro football player. So I had athletes and carpenters and all that in my family. I'm the only lawyer.
Very versatile.
And my sister ran a little daycare at her home before she passed away. So, that's the family I come from. And I have a lot of respect for working people and for people who put their talents to building. We need infrastructure. We need building. We need homes. We need houses. We need roads. We need all these things. And this is not something either in those trades or in government service where it should matter where you come from or what your background is. Pierre will often say his parents raised him to understand it's not where he came from because he was an adopted child from an unwed 16-year-old girl.
Great story.
But it's where you're going.
Yeah.
And that's what the kind of Canada we see, a Canada of small government and big citizens, a Canada where we work together and we understand we're all in it together. So those types of pieces of legislation, to my mind, go completely against what the Canadian values are that people come here for. We welcome people from all over the world. We welcome a lot of people in recent years, many years now, from India and also from China, Taiwan. Principally, I would say those are probably the main areas where new Canadians come from, and they should come here knowing that they are free to practice their religion, their ways, but also adopt, being Canadian. Some of the most patriotic Canadians I know are people who weren't born here. They're people who said, I chose this country and I love this country and I love the opportunities this country has given me. And I was lucky to be born here, in my view, but it doesn't matter whether you were born here or chose it. The values should be the same. And governments and governors who are the people who run for office should always understand that and have that foremost in their mind. A concern I have about the present Liberal government, and where I see a difference between them and us, is they are not really interested in nation building. And I believe that's very important. You are part, of course, of a global and international community, but we also have our own identity here in Canada. We have a country to be proud of. We're rich in many resources, not just our people, and our people are intelligent, motivated, innovators in many, many fields, but also it's about wanting togetherness, wanting unity.
Yes.
That's nation building. If that is not one of your principal goals as a federal government, if you're quite happy to say, well, nobody understands Alberta, so we'll ignore them, and Quebec is different, and of course we have differences, but we have more in common than we have differences. And so to my mind, national governments should be all about unity. About unifying people, about encouraging people to work together. And we also have always prided ourselves, and I believe we delivered, in not making big announcements without a plan to implement. The Liberal government is very big on announcements, and then they don't do it. They don't do the work. That doesn't help anybody, and people have high expectations, and then they're disappointed. Immigration, on that for a moment. We have 2.5 million people in our immigration backlog. 2.5 million people who have filled out the forms, they're in the lineups, and they're just not getting to
files being assigned to the IDs which are not valid.
Exactly. This is hard for me to understand and completely unacceptable. You have too many people working in immigration in Canada under this government who aren't actually even there. They're either not there at all, like you just said, assigned to people who don't work there anymore, or they're working from home. The mentality is not one of being efficient, getting people through the system, getting them here. Now the immigration minister makes a big pronouncement. We're going to bring in 500,000 new people a year. I have nothing against it. Numbers are numbers. But what I'm saying is, how can you promise people you will bring in 500,000 new Canadians a year when you have 2.5 million that you haven't dealt with? How can you say that you will have the schools and the hospitals, the roadways, the work for 500,000 new people when you haven't dealt with the 2.5 million yet? So there's nothing wrong with the concept or the idea. In fact, I would be in favor of it. But be efficient. Deliver on your promises. Don't just make promises. There's a lot of heartbreak in broken promises.
Community, from my last 13 years in this radio, we transferred or transitioned a lot. We have still stigma from backcountry to give respect and being around with a politician to get pictures, call him to own parties, weddings, and religious ceremonies. And if he did or she did or they did something for them, for the community, or for the personal gain, they don't forget. They vote them from years and years in the same cycle that they did help us. Being a politician, you are representing a constituency. You are there to serve people. Why politicians think like that those supporters, those are help seekers, should be working as a slave with them always? There should be some difference of opinions, and they can think from they were helping that candidate for some goodies. Now they don't. So to getting in the public life, working 5 days in Ottawa and getting 2 days on our all celebrations, is that the real life of a politician?
It's part of it. Mm-hmm. It's certainly not the full picture. And we help people in so many different ways. Obviously, I'm a federal representative, so it's federal programs I'm helping with. If someone has issues with immigration, that's federal.
Yeah.
Criminal law is federal. EI, employment insurance, is
Health
federal.
care.
CRA, income tax, is federal.
Most of
there's a lot of things where people just have problems. They're applying for something and they're not getting anywhere, or they're not getting a response. And my office can help people get through some of the confusion, or maybe just get more attention and get their problem dealt with. So that is quite a common thing. When you're home, let's take me as an example, because we're here in British Columbia.
Yeah.
I fly on Sundays to Ottawa.
5 hours.
I have to go in the mornings because there is only one direct flight, and it's at 8:10 in the morning. And with the airports like they are now, you have to be out there even for a domestic flight 2 hours ahead. It used to be 2 hours for an international flight.
Yes.
Now it's 2 hours for a domestic flight. If I didn't go then, the next real opportunity would be around noon, but then I have to fly through Toronto, and instead of a 5-hour trip, it's a 8 or 9 hour trip.
9 hours.
Plus you have this 2 hours in the airport before and an hour after. It basically takes your whole day. So when I'm invited to something, as I often am from the community on a Sunday afternoon, I am rarely here for it, because unless it's a week that I get to be home, and we do have those weeks, we call them constituency weeks, I cannot make any Sunday event. Then I go to Ottawa. I'm on the leadership team, as you've pointed out. That's one of only 9 people, and I'm the only representative from British Columbia. So I am there every morning to give the BC point of view and say what's going on here, as well as to make my whips report on caucus and things like that. So I can't be flying in at the last moment, and I can't miss my plane. I have to do this on a Sunday. Then generally I am there either till I can get a late flight on Thursday night out, which always has to be through Toronto, but I've already put in a full day's work. Then I go, there is no direct flight that's at the right time. So by the time I get home,
it's Friday
and
night.
If there's any delays, like when I came home for Christmas, I was an hour on the tarmac because there was no gate for my plane, and then another hour waiting for a bag, because usually I try and do carry-on, but it was Christmas. I had some presents, things like that. So by the time I'm actually hitting the pillow, as they say, Ontario time, it's probably 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh, my.
Then I have Friday and Saturday. That's what I have to go into my office to sign citizenship congratulations, to meet with people, or to go to events. And I do try and go to events, and I love them because I love people. So I love celebrating.
Yes.
And what's more celebratory than a wedding, and what's more personal than to say goodbye to someone who's passed. You want to pay respect. And I do both to the extent I can. But I don't do it because I think anyone owes me anything. I do it because I have friends in the community, or someone maybe has some prominence in the community. Maybe I didn't know them personally, but I feel it's important to show respect. But in return, what I am probably looking for is just the acknowledgement that I am trying to show that respect, and friendships do develop from that sometimes, and I'm very enriched by that.
Yes.
But when it comes to election time, I think it's important to also think to yourself, yes, maybe that person came to an event in my family 10 years ago. But when I needed something, when I needed to get a relative some help on an immigration file, or when I needed help to get someone to get through on my taxes, what office helped me with that? Who helped me with that? And that's I hope, going to be part of why people vote for us, is they understand that we're the results people. We're the people who actually don't just say we're going to do it, but actually get it done. And nothing gives me more joy than when my office says, this person called, they couldn't get through, they couldn't get their passport, and we got it for them. It was only 3 hours before they left, but we got it for them. Or we got that visa they needed that they couldn't get otherwise. And sometimes I work with others. Sometimes I work with the India consulate, for instance, where a Canadian who was maybe born in India, but they're Canadian now, they need a visa to get back to India. I've also worked with the Indian consulate to get their visas through. And these are things that you have to put a personal touch on. I can't just leave it to my staff. They can do some of it. I do some of it. Because you actually want to help. And that's who people should be thinking about and voting for. And to think on, yes, they made a big announcement, but did they actually do it? And, you know, we have so many examples. When we left at Christmas time, there was another Liberal minister in a scandal with a conflict of interest where she'd given a friend who she should never have given a contract to. She didn't even recuse, is the English word, but it means exclude herself from the conversation. She was part of all the decision making. Now, does she resign like we would have? No. Does the Prime Minister ask her to resign like our Prime Minister would have? No. She just goes, oh yeah, sorry about that. I realize now I shouldn't have done it. Oh well, you know, won't happen again. How can people trust that?
Yeah.
You can't trust that. You need to know that the people you're voting for are people of their word and people who honestly try. Sometimes I cannot do what I'm trying to do, but most of the time I can. And that's what I need people to remember. Voting is interesting. It's both something you do with your mind and your heart.
Yes.
Emotions are involved in voting.
So much involved.
And sometimes you vote just because someone's left you with a good feeling, maybe. Or they listen to an interview like this and they think, I like what that person had to say. Maybe that moves them to vote. There's many reasons. But if you're looking for people who earnestly want to work for the people, for their freedoms, for their livelihoods, to protect their paychecks, we're the ones talking like that. And in the past, we have delivered.
That's what we have for today. And one thing I would like to reward you with at the end of, your friend, your constituents, your colleagues in Ottawa, they always say Kerry is doing very, very gracefully, very, very respected. That's what Mr. Bollier said on the interview about you. And I think those are the value you got from your family as you discuss the working class from Ireland, and you're doing everything, and well-blessed family you're having. And at last I say very best of you, and Happy New Year in advance. And anything would you like to say in closing?
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate hearing that because usually the person doesn't hear it directly.
Yeah.
It's like when our children go to visit other families. We go, did they behave? Oh, thank goodness, because they don't always behave at home.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that, and I appreciate knowing you now over many years, and appreciate the invitation to be here today. And I want to wish everyone a very successful and prosperous new year. It's a time of new beginnings and new hope. I know things aren't easy for a lot of people. I know businesses are still trying to pull out of COVID lockdowns and difficulties. I know one of my own children is sick right now with cancer,
I'm
it
so
is
sorry to
very
hear
heavy
it.
on my heart and the heart of our family. And I know that many families
I will
go through
pray
these
for her.
things.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I just say to everyone, we're in it together.
Yeah.
We're all
We
family.
are all shoulder to
We're
shoulder.
brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And we will work together and we will succeed. And I thank you for your time.
No, it gave me more respect for you as you mentioned and discuss this family hard time. You still make for the community, and I'll pay for your children and for everyone, and
Thank you.
she will recover very soon with God's grace. Best wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is called statesmanship. I got so emotional, and still she make it. And when you have someone with critical illness and you are in off of your holidays and you still make for the community, it broadens me, your era of respect for me. That's what we all call the statesmanship, and that's what Kerry and Findlay shown us today. And with God's grace, everything will be perfect.